The sea has always carried a voice, older than stone, older than memory. It whispers in the crash of waves, soft and eternal, calling to those who listen. Tonight, we follow that voice into the heart of an ancient tale. A tale not of battles or blood, but of promises woven into salt and foam. It begins with the vast ocean stretching beyond sight, endless and alive. Its depths hold secrets, songs and oaths older than humankind itself. Among the gods, one rules these waters with both majesty and mystery. Poseidon, the lord of seas, whose trident commands the restless tides. But even a god is bound by words once spoken, vows never forgotten. The ocean's oath, a promise sealed in the deep, shapes the fate of all. It is a story of balance between shore and sea, of harmony or ruin. And as waves rise and fall, the oath waits to be remembered again. Come closer, listen to the water's breath, and let the myth unfold. For in the stillness of the deep, Poseidon's tale begins once more. The ocean stretches wide, endless beneath the sky, carrying the weight of silence and song. Its surface glimmers like glass, yet its heart beats in currents unseen, slow and eternal. And within that vastness rises a figure known to gods and mortals alike. Poseidon, lord of the seas, the one whose trident commands waves, storms, and stillness alike. He is power shaped in water, a presence that hums beneath every tide and every surge. The sailors who cross the waves speak his name in prayer, soft as wind on sails. They believe he hears, that the ocean itself listens and delivers their words to him. To mortals, he is the god of protection, wrath, and mystery, forever watching the horizon. Yet to the sea, he is something deeper, a guardian, a keeper of promises, old as time. Legends say he was born not only from the storm, but from silence before the storm. The ocean remembers when he first touched its surface, when his trident lit the depths. Every current swirled in recognition, every creature bowed as the sea welcomed its sovereign. But power, for Poseidon, was never only about ruling. It was about balance, about care. He felt the pulse of the ocean as a heart, steady and fragile all at once. The waves told him stories, the winds carried messages, the depths whispered secrets unspoken. He listened, because a god of the sea could not be deaf to its living voice. And in the listening, he found meaning. Not just dominion, but responsibility. For every storm he sent, he gave calm after. For every tide he raised, he lowered. The sea became his canvas, his companion and his oath. In the quiet of dawn, he would rise from the deep, unseen by mortal eyes. He would watch the sun paint the waves gold, each ray dancing like fire on water. The world above and the world below felt bound together in fragile harmony. And Poseidon, standing tall, knew that he was the bridge between both realms. But bridges require strength, and balance requires memory. Long ago, he had spoken words to the ocean, words that shaped his fate forever. He had promised to keep the sea and the shore in balance, neither to devour the other. It was not a promise of dominance, but of care, of protection, of sacred equilibrium. The sea, vast and powerful, had accepted this oath and sealed it in salt and foam. For centuries, Poseidon lived by it, watching, guiding, keeping the two worlds apart, yet joined. But the oath was not merely for gods. It echoed through waves, reached the ears of mortals. Those who listened learned respect, who sailed gently, who gave thanks to the tide. Yet time has a way of softening memories, of dimming the clarity of sacred words. And Poseidon felt it, subtle at first, like ripples on still water. The tides shifted strangely, storms whispered of imbalance, and the ocean sighed. Still, in this moment, in this story's beginning, The sea remembers its ruler true. Poseidon, majestic, eternal, restless, and bound not just to power, but to promise. The waves bow to him, the winds lean close, the deep listens in silence. For the god of the sea is awake, and the tale of the ocean's oath begins. The sea does not speak in words, but in rhythms, echoes, and endless whispers of foam. Each wave that touches the shore carries a message, soft as a sigh, ancient as time. To those who listen closely, the ocean is never silent. It is always telling its story. Sometimes it speaks in calm tides, gentle ripples brushing against sand with tender care. Other times, it speaks in storms, roaring with 1,000 voices, demanding to be heard. But always, beneath the noise, there is a secret current, a murmur older than the world. The sailors call it the sea's breath. The poets call it the ocean's song. Yet Poseidon knows it by another name. He calls it the whispering of the oath. For the ocean remembers every promise, every vow ever spoken across its waters. When lovers swore devotion by the shore, the waves carried their words into the deep. When kings promised peace or conquest, the tide bore witness and held their truth. The sea forgets nothing. It stores every whisper in shells, in tides, in echoes of foam. Even the faintest breath of hope or fear is carried into its endless embrace. And so Poseidon listens, for the whispers guide him, warn him, remind him of the past. He hears the joy of fishermen, thanking the waves for their safe return. He hears the sorrow of sailors lost in storms, their voices drifting through eternity. He hears the laughter of children playing where the tide curls, light and fleeting. And he hears oaths made by gods, sealed in storms, carved into the bones of the sea. The ocean whispers to him of balance, of the fragile line between land and water. It tells him that harmony is a promise, delicate and easily broken if forgotten. In its whispers, Poseidon senses unease, a ripple of warning woven into the song. The waves no longer sing only of joy, they murmur of hunger, of imbalance. Shorelines crumble faster, storms stir more often, and the currents twist in strange ways. The whispers grow restless, carrying questions instead of answers, doubts instead of peace. Poseidon knows the sea does not lie. Its song is truth, woven in foam and salt. He listens more deeply, lowering his trident into the water, letting it hum with voices. Every drop vibrates with meaning. Every current carries a tale of what is to come. He closes his eyes, and in the whispers, he hears echoes of the oath once sworn. The ocean asks him, "Will you remember? Will you guard the balance you once vowed?" It is not an accusation, but a reminder, spoken in the only language the sea knows. Poseidon feels the weight of it, heavy and soft as the tide pressing against the shore. The whispers are not only his burden, they belong to all who walk the earth. For the oath was never about one god or one realm, but about harmony itself. As he listens, he knows the whispers will grow louder if ignored, turning into storms. But for now, they remain gentle, like a hand brushing across the surface of water. The sea is patient, but it does not forget, and its voice cannot be silenced. Poseidon raises his gaze to the horizon, the whispers still echoing in his mind. The ocean has spoken. It remembers the promise. It asks for balance once more. And thus begins the journey, not of conquest, but of listening, remembering, and renewal. The whispering waves guide him, their song weaving the path the tale must follow. Long ago, before the world was shaped as we know it, the sea held a secret vow. It was not carved in stone, nor written in scrolls, but carried in salt and current. The oath was born when the gods first divided realms, sky, earth, and sea. Zeus took the heavens, Hades claimed the underworld, and Poseidon received the ocean. Yet with his dominion came a burden, a promise whispered in the deep. The ocean spoke to Poseidon, asking for balance, for harmony between water and land. For sea and shore were not enemies, but siblings, bound by tides and time. If either grew too greedy, the world itself would tremble under imbalance. Poseidon placed his hand upon the waves and made his vow eternal. He swore to guard the fragile line where water kissed the earth's edge. No tide would swallow the land unchecked. No drought would starve the ocean. The oath was sacred, sealed in foam and thunder, carried through every current. The creatures of the sea heard it first, and their voices echoed in song. Dolphins leapt in joy. Whales sang deep notes. Corals glowed with silent approval. The oath spread to the winds, carried to distant shores where mortals dwelled. And though they did not understand its depth, they felt its protection. The sea gave them fish, safe passage, and rhythm, asking only for respect. Poseidon watched over this balance with vigilance, his trident a symbol of promise. He became more than ruler. He was guardian, bound not by power, but by duty. For centuries the oath held strong, shaping harmony between worlds above and below. Mortals honored the sea with offerings, pouring wine into waves, singing prayers. They knew the ocean's gifts and feared its wrath when respect was forgotten. But even gods cannot escape time, and even oaths can fade in memory. As ages passed, humans grew bold, taking more, giving less in return. Ships grew larger, harbors deeper, and the sea's voice became harder to hear. Poseidon still listened, but he felt the weight of neglect pressing on the oath. The balance he had promised to guard began to waver like a fragile wave. Shorelines shifted unnaturally, storms swelled with greater force, currents twisted. And beneath it all, the sea whispered of cracks forming in the ancient vow. Poseidon remembered the moment of his promise, clear as sunlight on water. He recalled the weight of his hand, the salt upon his skin, the vow spoken. He knew that if forgotten, the oath would unravel, and harmony would collapse. For without balance, land and sea would become enemies, tearing at each other. The ocean would rise without mercy, and the earth would resist with equal force. It was not war Poseidon feared, but the loss of harmony between worlds. The oath was more than words. It was the lifeblood of the ocean itself. Every tide, every ripple, every wave carried its rhythm, its eternal reminder. Poseidon could not abandon it, for it was bound to his very soul. And so, as whispers of imbalance reached him, he resolved to remember. He would not let time erase the promise sealed in salt and storm. The ocean's oath was still alive, waiting, asking to be renewed once more. And Poseidon, lord of the sea, guardian of the deep, felt its call. The forgotten oath was not truly lost. It lingered in every wave that touched the shore. And now, as the sea stirred uneasily, its voice rose to remind him again. For the story of balance was not over. It was only beginning anew. The sea was restless, and its unease spread like a shiver across the horizon. Waves rose higher than before, though no storm brewed in the sky above. The tide crept further inland, swallowing shores in silence, leaving mortals puzzled and afraid. It was not rage, but a warning, a whisper of imbalance carried in every swell. Fishermen noticed first, their nets filling strangely, creatures fleeing familiar waters. The currents twisted in directions unknown, pulling boats into uneasy paths. Birds that once skimmed the waves circled in confusion, sensing change in the sea's heart. To Poseidon, these signs were not accidents, but echoes of a promise fraying. walked the ocean floor, trident glowing softly, listening to the pulse of currents. The rhythm was uneven, broken like a song sung out of tune. Corals dimmed their colors, once vibrant and alive, now fading as if weary. The dolphins, once joyful messengers, leapt less often, their chatter carrying unease. Even the great whales shifted their songs, low notes laced with sorrow. The ocean was speaking, louder now, though few mortals could hear its plea. Shorelines crumbled where cliffs once stood strong, stones falling into the hungry sea. Villages along the coast woke to find their homes closer to the tide. Storms arrived without warning, brief but fierce, leaving silence heavy in their wake. The people prayed, but their offerings were small, their respect fading with time. Mortals no longer feared the sea as they once did, but they forgot to honor it. They built harbors deeper, cut forests along shores, and poured shadows into the waves. Poseidon felt each wound as though it touched his own skin. For the sea was not just his domain, but a living body bound to his vow. The oath he had sworn pressed upon him now, heavier with each restless tide. It was not anger that stirred him, but sorrow that the balance slipped away. He remembered the oath's words, the promise of harmony between earth and sea. Now the earth took more than it gave, and the sea recoiled in protest. The rising unease was not rebellion, but the ocean's attempt to be heard. Poseidon stood at the threshold of the deep, where waves met the edge of land. He listened to the whispers of the surf, each crash telling of neglect. The world was tilting, not by sudden war, but by slow forgetting. Even gods could not mend what mortals ignored, unless the oath was remembered. The ocean's voice grew louder, weaving into winds, slipping into dreams of sailors. It called not for vengeance, but for recognition, for the balance to return. Poseidon knew this unease was only the beginning, a tremor before the storm. If left unanswered, the sea would rise, not in wrath, but in sorrow uncontained. The trident in his hand shimmered, as if reminding him of his role. He was not only a god of storms, but of guardianship, of sacred keeping. The unease in the waves was not against him, but with him, urging him onward. The ocean begged for renewal, for its oath to be remembered before it broke. And Poseidon, gazing upon the trembling horizon, understood the call. The balance was faltering, the oath weakening, but it was not yet lost. The sea was restless, yes, but still it waited. For him, for the promise kept, for the god of the deep had not forgotten, and neither had the waves. And in their unease lay hope, a reminder that the story was not yet over. From the quiet depths, an ancient figure stirred, older than Poseidon, older than storms. It was Nereus, the old man of the sea, whose wisdom flowed like endless tides. His beard was woven with strands of seaweed, his eyes as deep as forgotten trenches. He did not command with power, but with knowledge that no age could erode. Where Poseidon was force and might, Nereus was patience, silence, and hidden truth. He rose slowly, the waters parting gently as if welcoming their elder home. Poseidon turned when he felt the shift, for he knew this presence instantly. "Nereus," he said, his voice echoing like thunder over calm waves. The old god bowed his head, not in submission, but in solemn respect. "Lord of the seas," Nereus answered, "I come not with praise, but with remembrance." Poseidon felt the weight in those words, heavier than anchors in the deep. Nereus stepped closer, his voice carrying the steadiness of currents that never rest. "The oath you swore still lingers, but its threads weaken with each forgotten shore." The words struck Poseidon like cold water, sharp, undeniable, clear as as truth. You promised balance, Nereus continued, between land and sea, between taking and giving. Yet mortals no longer hear the whispers. They build and consume without remembrance. Poseidon's hand tightened on his trident, the glow pulsing like a heartbeat. I have not forgotten, he said, his voice firm, though touched with sorrow. I still guard the seas, though mortals grow deaf to the ocean's song. Nereus lifted a hand, calm and steady, as if soothing restless waters. It is not wrath that is needed, he said, but renewal of the vow. The ocean asks not for vengeance, but for harmony, as it once knew. Poseidon's gaze darkened, but not with anger, with the weight of memory. He remembered the day he swore, the salt on his lips, the promise eternal. He remembered the creatures that sang, the waves that bowed, the oath sealed in foam. Nereus's eyes softened, though they carried the sorrow of countless years. You are the keeper of the deep, Poseidon, but even keepers must remember. The whispers grow louder because the sea is afraid of being forgotten. And fear turns calm into storm, song into cry, balance into fracture. Poseidon lowered his gaze, watching the currents swirl around his feet. I feel it, he admitted. The tides shift strangely. The sea sighs with unease. Nereus placed a hand upon his shoulder, gentle as a wave brushing stone. Then listen, Lord of Seas, not only to storms, but to silence, to memory. Mortals must be reminded. The oath must live again, or it will be lost. Poseidon lifted his trident, its light scattering across the ocean floor. The creatures nearby, turtles, fish, and dolphins, paused as if awaiting his choice. I will remember, he said, his voice steady, filled with the weight of promise. But how shall mortals hear if they no longer listen? Nereus's smile was faint, like sunlight flickering beneath shallow waves. Speak through the sea itself, he said, for the waves still touch their world. Let them feel the memory in the tides. Let them hear in the shells. Remind them not with fear, but with truth. The ocean is alive, and it remembers. Poseidon breathed deeply, the salt filling his chest, the vow echoing once more. The sea trembled softly, not in anger, but in recognition of the words spoken. The ocean's oath stirred, awakened by memory, by the wisdom of the old god. Nereus bowed once more, his task fulfilled, his message carried. And Poseidon stood taller, his resolve clear as the horizon at dawn. The balance was fragile, but it was not yet broken. With Nereus's reminder, the journey toward renewal had begun, and the sea itself listened, waiting for the god to act, to remember, to restore. The sun rose over the horizon, its light spilling gold across the restless waves. The sea glimmered, but beneath the sparkle, unease still whispered like a hidden current. On the shores of a small village, life carried on, though the ocean watched silently. Fishermen prepared their nets, mothers gathered shells, children laughed at the water's edge. They did not see how the tide crept closer, reaching further than it once had. They did not hear the sorrow in the gulls' cries, nor the shift of currents below. But one among them felt it, a boy who listened where others turned away. His name was Callis, a dreamer who wandered the shoreline at dawn and dusk. He pressed shells to his ear and claimed he could hear voices inside the sound. Others laughed, but he never doubted, for the ocean spoke to him in whispers. That morning, the voice was stronger, clearer, as if calling his name through foam. Callis, it said, soft yet deep, echoing like thunder wrapped in velvet tides. He stumbled back, wide-eyed, scanning the empty shore, but no figure appeared. The sea rolled forward, curling around his feet, gentle but insistent in its touch. He listened again, and the words formed, carried on the sigh of the waves. The oath is fading. You must remember. You must remind them. Callis shivered. Though the sun was warm, his heart racing with both fear and awe. He ran to his grandmother, the oldest in the village, keeper of fading tales. She sat by the fire, weaving nets, her eyes clouded, but still sharp with memory. "Grandmother," Callis whispered. The sea spoke. It called me by name. She looked at him, and in her silence, he saw recognition, not disbelief. "You hear what others forget," she said softly. "The ocean does not waste its voice." She told him of the old stories, of gods who walk the waves, unseen but present. She spoke of Poseidon, the keeper of tides, and of a vow sworn long ago. "A promise," she murmured, "that land and sea would share, never consume alone." Callis listened, wide-eyed, the firelight flickering as her words painted ancient images. "The oath is not gone," she said, "but it sleeps, waiting for ears that still listen." He leaned closer, heart pounding, every word filling him like a tide at flood. "If the sea called you," she continued, "then it remembers, and you must answer." The boy trembled, for he was small, only one among many who did not hear. "How can I remind them, grandmother? They laugh when I speak of the waves." Her hand, weathered and strong, closed around his. "Truth is stronger than laughter." She leaned close, her voice low, carrying the weight of generations forgotten. "Tell the story. Sing it, shout it, whisper it. Let it live again through you." Callis nodded, though fear pressed heavy, like a storm cloud low upon the sea. That night, as the village slept, he sat by the shore, staring at the moonlit tide. He whispered back to the waves, repeating what he had learned, shaping memory into words. And the ocean answered, not in thunder, but in calm, steady rhythms of surf. The boy closed his eyes, hearing the oath, the promise woven into every current. It was not his to keep, but his to carry. A spark passed from sea to shore. Somewhere deep, Poseidon stirred, sensing the boy's voice carried on the wind. The god's gaze turned toward the mortal coast, where a single child remembered. The balance was not yet restored, but the first thread had been rewoven. And the ocean's oath, faint but alive, echoed once more through the heart of man. The sun rose over the horizon, its light spilling gold across the restless waves. The sea glimmered, but beneath the sparkle, unease still whispered like a hidden current. On the shores of a small village, life carried on, though the ocean watched silently. Fishermen prepared their nets, mothers gathered shells, children laughed at the water's edge. They did not see how the tide crept closer, reaching further than it once had. They did not hear the sorrow in the gulls' cries, nor the shift of currents below. But one among them felt it, a boy who listened where others turned away. His name was Callis, a dreamer who wandered the shoreline at dawn and dusk. He pressed shells to his ear and claimed he could hear voices inside the sound. Others laughed, but he never doubted, for the ocean spoke to him in whispers. That morning, the voice was stronger, clearer, as if calling his name through foam. "Callis," it said, soft yet deep, echoing like thunder wrapped in velvet tides. He stumbled back, wide-eyed, scanning the empty shore, but no figure appeared. The sea rolled forward, curling around his feet, gentle but insistent in its touch. He listened again, and the words formed, carried on the sigh of the waves. "The oath is fading. You must remember. You must remind them." Callis shivered. Though the sun was warm, his heart racing with both fear and awe. He ran to his grandmother, the oldest in the village, keeper of fading tales. She sat by the fire, weaving nets, her eyes clouded, but still sharp with memory. "Grandmother," Callis whispered. The sea spoke. It called me by name. She looked at him, and in her silence, he saw recognition, not disbelief. "You hear what others forget," she said softly. "The ocean does not waste its voice." She told him of the old stories, of gods who walked the waves, unseen but present. She spoke of Poseidon, the keeper of tides, and of a vow sworn long ago. "A promise," she murmured, "that land and sea would share, never consume alone." Callis listened, wide-eyed, the firelight flickering as her words painted ancient images. "The oath is not gone," she said, "but it sleeps, waiting for ears that still listen." He leaned closer, heart pounding, every word filling him like a tide at flood. "If the sea called you," she continued, "then it remembers, and you must answer." The boy trembled, for he was small, only one among many who did not hear. "How can I remind them, grandmother? They laugh when I speak of the wave." Her hand, weathered and strong, closed around his. "Truth is stronger than laughter." She leaned close, her voice low, carrying the weight of generations forgotten. "Tell the story. Sing it, shout it, whisper it. Let it live again through you." Callis nodded, though fear pressed heavy, like a storm cloud low upon the sea. That night, as the village slept, he sat by the shore, staring at the moonlit tide. He whispered back to the waves, repeating what he had learned, shaping memory into words. And the ocean answered, not in thunder, but in calm, steady rhythms of surf. The boy closed his eyes, hearing the oath, the promise woven into every current. It was not his to keep, but his to carry. A spark passed from sea to shore. Somewhere deep, Poseidon stirred, sensing the boy's voice carried on the wind. The god's gaze turned toward the mortal coast, where a single child remembered. The balance was not yet restored, but the first thread had been rewoven. And the ocean's oath, faint but alive, echoed once more through the heart of man. The moon climbed high above the sea, silver light shimmering across the restless tide. Callis walked the shoreline alone, his thoughts heavy with the ocean's whisper. The waves curled at his feet, gentle yet insistent, urging him toward something unseen. His grandmother's words echoed in his heart. The sea remembers, and so must you. That night, as the village slept, the boy felt a pull deeper than the tide itself. He stepped into the water, each wave folding around him as though guiding his path. The sea grew calm, unusually still, as if holding its breath for what was to come. A glow began beneath the surface, faint but steady, like stars hidden under the waves. Callis hesitated, fear rising, but the voice returned, clear and steady as a drumbeat. Do not fear, child of the shore. The oath remembers you as you remember it. The glow widened, forming a circle of light, a doorway carved in the heart of water. Callis felt his feet move forward, though he did not command them, drawn into the circle. The sea opened before him, not to drown, but to carry him deeper into its memory. Drifted downward, breathing without fear, the water holding him as if in embrace. Images flickered around him, whales singing, corals blooming, ships sailing under calm skies. Then came older visions. Poseidon raising his trident, the sea bowing in reverence. Mortals knelt upon shores, offering gifts, singing prayers, honoring the bond of balance. The ocean's oath was alive in those moments, glowing like fire woven into salt. Callis gasped, though no water entered, for the truth unfurled before his eyes. He was not chosen to fight, but to carry memory, to awaken what was nearly lost. The voice spoke again, no longer distant, but close, warm, and filled with strength. You are the bridge, Callis. Through you, the shore will hear what it has forgotten. Through you, the oath will breathe again, if you dare to carry its song. The boy trembled, feeling small against such ancient weight, but his heart did not yield. I will remember, he whispered, though no sound left his lips, only truth. I will remind them, even if they laugh, even if they turn away. The sea stirred around him, glowing brighter as if wrapping him in its blessing. From the deep rose a figure, vast and radiant, crowned with coral and stormlight. Poseidon himself appeared, his trident gleaming, his gaze fixed on the boy. The god's eyes were vast as the ocean, filled with sorrow, power, and unspoken hope. You hear? Poseidon said, his voice rolling like thunder across endless horizons. You listen, where others do not. The oath remembers you, and so do I. Callis bowed his head, unsure if his courage was enough, yet unwilling to falter. Poseidon lowered his trident, and the sea hushed, as though the world paused to listen. Carry it, the god said simply. Carry the oath in word, in song, in memory. For gods may guard, but mortals must remember. Balance cannot live without both. The boy lifted his eyes, his heart steady, the glow of the sea burning within him. I will, he answered. And the ocean trembled as if sealing his vow. The vision began to fade, the glow dimming, the doorway closing like a dream's end. Callis felt the water lift him, bearing him upward toward the starlit surface. He gasped as he emerged, the night air sharp and real, waves lapping gently. The sea was calm now, as though watching, waiting for him to begin his task. He stood on the sand, soaked but steady, the god's words echoing in his chest. The ocean's oath was no longer just a legend, but alive in him, waiting to be told. And as the tide whispered against the shore, Callis knew his journey had only begun. Morning came softly, the sea stretching wide beneath a pale sky brushed with gold. Callis awoke on the shore, the memory of Poseidon's voice still echoing in his chest. The villagers found him there, clothes soaked, eyes bright with something they could not name. Boy, what have you done? One fisherman asked, shaking his head with disapproval. Callis stood slowly, his gaze steady, his words trembling, but true. The ocean spoke. Poseidon remembers. The oath is alive, and we must honor it. Laughter broke among them, uneasy but sharp, as if to shield against belief. Child's tales, they muttered. Dreams from salt and sleep, nothing more. But his grandmother stepped forward, her voice steady as a tide against rock. Do not laugh. The boy speaks what the sea has whispered for generations. Silence fell. The villagers looked to the shore, where waves lapped calm but insistent. The water seemed to lean closer, as if listening, as if waiting. Callis drew a breath, his courage rising like a sail catching wind. I saw it, he said. The vow, the balance, the promise between land and sea. I saw Poseidon himself. He has not abandoned us, but we have forgotten him. The villagers shifted uneasily, their faces caught between doubt and fear. One old sailor, his hair white as foam, stepped forward with a shaking hand. I too have heard, he whispered. The sea sings at night, when no one listens. He told of nights when his ship drifted silent, and voices echoed through the waves. He spoke of visions in the foam, shapes of gods woven in moonlight. Others began to murmur, fragments of memory surfacing like shells from the sand. Stories once told around fires returned, fragile but alive, carried by Callis's words. The boy felt the weight shift, disbelief cracking like stone beneath the tide. But not all were convinced, for some shook their heads, clinging to the world they knew. The sea is nothing but water, a younger man argued. It takes, it gives, without thought. Callis stepped closer, his voice calm but firm, like a steady wave against stone. No, it remembers. The sea is alive, and it keeps the promise even if we do not. As he spoke, the tide surged suddenly, rising higher, curling around their ankles. The villagers gasped, staring as the water shimmered faintly with an inner light. It was not threatening, but it was undeniable. The sea answering the boy's truth. The grandmother raised her hands, her voice rising in prayer, half song, half memory. Keeper of tides, we remember. Guardian of depths, we hear you once more. Her words rippled through the air, carried by the hush of the waves. For a moment, it seemed the entire shore held its breath, listening. Then the tide receded, gentle and calm, leaving shells scattered like offerings at their feet. The villagers bent to pick them up, each shell humming faintly with a hidden song. Children held them to their ears and gasped, for voices echoed within, soft and clear. The oath, Callis whispered. It speaks even now. The villagers looked at him, not with laughter, with unease and awe. Something had shifted. Memory stirred, belief awakened, fragile yet undeniable. The old sailor bowed his head, his eyes shining with tears. The boy is right. The sea remembers, and we must remember too. Callis felt the weight of Poseidon's charge burn brighter in his chest. It was not enough to hear. It was not enough to believe. They must act. They must live in balance. They must honor the ocean's oath again. The villagers stood in silence, the waves whispering at their feet, the sky wide above. And though doubt lingered, the first step had been taken. The story had been told. The sea, vast and eternal, listened, and in its depths, Poseidon's gaze softened. The oath was not yet restored, but the tide was turning, and memory was alive again. The days that followed were filled with whispers, as the village carried both doubt and hope in equal measure. Callis walked among them, no longer just a boy, but a voice tied to something greater. Every tide seemed different now, every wave carrying secrets that some began to hear. The children listened most closely, their ears pressed to shells, their hearts open to wonder. The elders spoke again of stories they had buried, afraid of ridicule, now finding new breath. But there were still those who resisted, refusing to let go of the world they understood. They are tricks of the sea, one man said. Illusions meant to tempt us into madness. Yet when storms passed the horizon, they softened before reaching the shore, turning aside. The fishermen noticed their nets fuller, the waters kinder, though they dared not speak it. Callis knew the oath was stirring, but he also knew memory was fragile like driftwood. The sea had shown him truths, but it had also given him a burden to carry. One night, as he stood alone by the shore, the tide rose higher than ever before. The water glowed faintly, and within it shimmered shapes like shadows of another world. Whales sang deep notes that vibrated through the sand, echoes of ancient promise. Then came the voice again, soft but steady, filling him with both awe and dread. Child of shore, the oath stirs, but balance is not yet whole. The land takes, but does not give. The sea waits, but patience wanes. Callis bowed his head, his heart heavy, knowing Poseidon's warning was not idle. "What must I do?" he asked, his words carried away by the salty wind. The answer came like thunder rolling across calm waters, ancient yet urgent. "You must remind them through act, not word. The oath breathes only when lived. Balance is not a tale to tell, but a bond to honor indeed." The boy shivered, for he knew this path was harder than carrying a story. To change hearts was one thing, but to change lives was far greater. Still, he could not turn back. The sea had chosen him, and he had chosen the sea. The next day, he stood before the village, his voice firm, his eyes steady. "We must give back," he said. "We must honor the sea not with words, but with action. Clean its shores, guard its creatures, respect its gifts, and remember its song." Some mocked, shaking their heads, unwilling to believe such labor mattered. But others nodded, feeling truth stir in their bones, the memory too strong to ignore. Together with a few, Callis began to walk the beach, gathering what did not belong. Nets torn and left adrift, broken wood, careless waste, all lifted from the sand. Children followed him, laughing, yet serious, carrying shells as if they were treasures. The sea seemed to respond, its waves gentler, its song clearer, its light brighter. At night, when they rested, Callis dreamt of Poseidon watching, his gaze neither harsh nor kind. The gods seemed to wait, to see if mortals would choose memory over forgetfulness. The village began to shift slowly, the tide of disbelief turning grain by grain. Fishermen gave thanks before casting nets. Children sang to the waves at dusk. And the old sailor told tales again, not as myth, but as living truth. Yet shadows lingered, for not all hearts were swayed, not all lives had changed. Callis knew the oath was alive, but fragile, like a flame in the wind. One careless breath could end it, unless he guarded it with all he had. The sea whispered in the night, urging him forward, reminding him of the vow. The journey was far from over, but the tide was moving, and balance was near. In the hush of waves and wind, Callis felt hope bloom like dawn upon the horizon. The sea stretched endless, calm yet alive, as the final days of Callis's journey approached. The village no longer mocked, for they had seen storms fade and nets return full. Children sang to the waves, elders told stories with reverence, and the shore grew sacred again. But Callis knew his task was not just for one village, but for all who touched the sea. The oath demanded memory not of one place, but of every soul who drew from the tides. One dawn, as the sky blushed with gold, Callis walked alone to the edge of the water. The horizon shimmered, and once more the glow rose, soft and steady, calling him forward. Poseidon appeared, vast and radiant, the ocean bending in silence around his form. "You have carried the oath, child of shore." The god's voice rolled like a deep tide. "You have stirred memory where silence had buried it, and balance stirs once again." Callis bowed his head, his heart full but heavy, for he knew his work was not ended. "Lord of seas, I have tried," he said, "but doubt still lingers, and not all remember." Poseidon lowered his trident, the water trembling as though it too listened to the boy. "Doubt will always linger," the god answered, "but memory is a seed, and you have planted it. Through you the oath breathes again. Through them it may yet live." Callis felt the truth in those words, steady and strong as the pull of the tide. The god's gaze softened, ancient sorrow giving way to a glimmer of hope. "The sea cannot force balance," Poseidon said. "It must be chosen, cherished, lived. You are the reminder, but they are the keepers. Do not forget this." boy lifted his eyes, steady and brave, and nodded with quiet resolve. I will remind them. I will walk every shore, speak to every ear that listens. The god smiled faintly, like sunlight breaking through storm, rare and fleeting. Then go, child of shore. The sea walks with you, wherever you carry its song. With that, Poseidon faded into the waves, the glow dissolving into dawn's first light. The ocean remained calm, but its voice hummed softly in every curl of foam. Callis returned to the village, his steps firm, his heart blazing with purpose. He gathered the people and spoke, not of gods, but of balance, memory, and care. He taught them to honor the tide, to guard its creatures, to respect its rhythm. And they listened, for the sea itself seemed to echo his words with each wave. Seasons passed, and the village changed, no longer blind to the ocean's living song. Other shores began to hear as travelers carried whispers of the boy and the oath. Stories spread like gulls across the wind, reaching distant coasts and foreign lands. And wherever they traveled, the sea stirred, gentler, kinder, as if pleased by remembrance. Years later, Callis stood once more on the sand, older now, but his gaze still bright. The sea sang to him, not as burden, but as companion, its voice woven with his own. The oath lived, not in stone, not in temple, but in hearts that chose to remember. Poseidon's trident no longer loomed in warning, but shimmered in blessing from the deep. The boy had become the bridge, the keeper of memory, the voice of balance. And though his journey was endless, he knew he was never alone, for the sea walked with him. As the tide whispered against the shore, Callis smiled, hearing the ocean's eternal song. The oath was alive, not as myth, but as truth, carried in waves, in words, in lives. And so the story closed, not with an ending, but with a tide that forever returned. For the ocean's oath was not finished. It was living, breathing, eternal, waiting to be remembered again.